and it looked like a football of metal.
It's true. And they were able to identify what store it was from, and they called up the store owner and said, "Hey, we got your money." And they gave him their money, his money. The Ben & Jerry store owner.
You mean the money that was twisted up inside that football? Or was there some... that was weird. I mean, how can that happen, that you have this densely compacted metal with totally intact pieces of paper sticking out?
It didn't burn.
It didn't burn. And again, the same thing happens over and over. Papers seem to be intact. There were papers floating all over. In fact, papers came down before the dust came down. And this whole subject of paper near cars that had just been not incinerated, toasted. These cars that had been toasted all around are these flutters of paper that had landed around these cars, and yet they were totally intact.
And there's some images where you have this orange glowing piece of material. We don't know what it is, but something orange and glowing sitting on paper, and the paper's not burning.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, we're just now adding more evidence to the weirdness of this whole thing. I'm not asking you to step out on a limb beyond what you've already done, which is huge. But
what I say about that is, we do know that hot things glow.
Yes.
But also, not everything that glows is hot.
Yes.
We can compare a fluorescent light bulb with an incandescent light bulb.
Mm-hmm.
There's two different phenomena going on there.
Mm-hmm.
Also, there's fireflies that glow.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Yeah. And so there was this phenomena that was occurring. And again, I mean, you have all these people that went through this experience. I mean, we will. I have more things I want to ask you about here, but it's just one surreal, odd bit of evidence after another. None of it stacks up to anything that's been spoken of up until this time. And you had people, Tim again, you mentioned, he said to the people that he came in, he was one of the witnesses, said, basically, where the F are the towers? What happened? Where's the debris? Everyone was just standing there as though they were in a daze. What just happened? Where's the sound? Where's the collapse? Where are the towers?
This is when they were trapped. Still, those 14 people were trapped in the stairwell. They were on their handy-talkies, calling for their buddies to come rescue them. Yeah, where are you? Stairwell B, Tower 1. Where? Tower 1, Stairwell B. What? Yeah. Where's Tower 1? They thought these voices were coming out of nowhere.
Well, there's nothing funny about it, but again, everything about this is so absurd and extreme. And one of the things that you show in this book is when you have a traditional kind of explosion, such as a controlled demolition, you have a certain kind of window breakage and so forth. The signatures of the glass that was broken wasn't anything like a normal demolition, though, was it?
Oh, more than that, very much different. You think about this, just mental exercise. Whether it's pancaking down on its own or you have cutter charges chopping things up and the junk's coming down, whatever the case is, if that stuff lands on the ground, squirt stuff out the side, at that time, if it's taken 8 seconds to come down or 10 seconds to come down, that by the time it gets to the ground, that stuff is squirting out of there at Mach 1 to Mach 2.
Mm-hmm.
And if that stuff is shooting out, we're talking about a soda pop can, everything, it becomes a projectile,
mm-hmm.
and pieces of junk, and it would be, all the shrapnel would be all hitting every building around the complex.
Right.
And you'd have pockmarks all over. Yet the facade of these buildings is nearly pristine. It doesn't have all this, it doesn't look like it was sandblasted with, or, had a rocket launcher shooting all sorts of trash at it.
Mm-hmm.
Except we have rounded holes in windows. The outer pane, while the inner pane is still intact.
Yeah, that was bizarre.
How do you get a professional glass cutter to even do that?
Well,
I don't think you could.
How would an energy device even do that?
As it turns out, longitudinal energy waves do this. And I hypothesized that, with this, how the mechanics would be. Imagine if you dropped a rock at a still pond. You see the ripples go outward.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've displaced the water laterally.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be, and it would be either round wakes. So if you shoot an energy beam at a window, you might get the same kind of thing rippling outward, like a rock going through water.
Mm-hmm.
When a physical object like a rock hits a window, it bends it, and it kind of bows out, very instantaneously. And glass, because it's a brittle material, can't handle being put into tension. And when it bows out from the rock hitting it, the opposite side is in tension and it breaks.
Mm-hmm.
So what this says is, breaks the whole window. You get cracks all over the place. There's spiderweb-like pattern. Anyone who's thrown a baseball through a window has seen that. The window gets trashed. You don't make a round hole in the middle of the window.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something else doing that. And as it turns out, that can be replicated in the lab with longitudinal energy waves.
Okay, and we're going to go to that again in just a little bit once we get through all the evidence here. There was another odd little bit here about some molten steel in steel-toed boots, but apparently the flesh of the person didn't burn. Did I understand that correctly?
Steel-toed boots is one of the biggest things.
Steel-toed boots?
Steel-toed boots. Out still on the rubble, it's still, I believe, 1,100 degrees. The guy's boots just melt within a few hours.
Right. There's a lot of stories like this that get repeated over and over again because in that moment, people have questions. They need answers. As soon as they're given answers, they go on. They don't stop to think if that's a reasonable answer in this moment of, dramatic events. And they just repeat them over and over again, and people keep repeating them. And even the truth movement, it kept repeating the story about steel-toed boots were melting because it was so hot. Well, if you put something on your grill that hot that's going to melt melt steel, you're not going to be surviving through that. And as I like to say, if my steel oven is melting, the turkey inside is more than well done.
Yes.
But we have no reports of burned feet.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was reading. So go ahead.
So what it captures is reminding someone of this. They're describing what's happening the best they can.
Well, I have a little note here in the sidelines that it's 11, it takes that the heat would normally be at 1,100 degrees or so to create the molten steel. Did I write that down correctly?
Maybe it's like 1,500 centigrade or 2,800 Fahrenheit.
Oh, okay. All right.
Way out there. You're definitely going to have your turkey overcooked with that.
Well, you're going to have your tootsies burned, that's for sure.
Yeah. And there's no reports of burned feet or burned bones or toes. But the boots apparently were disintegrating. There's also a story about the last guy out. They knew he just got out by the skin of his teeth because his shoes were blown clear off. His feet, that's what his friend said.
Wow. So here we have, just now kind of going back at some of the things we've talked about, some of these oddities. We have steel melting that would normally melt at very high temperatures without burning people's feet. So we have windows where a hole has been blown out of one pane but not the other pane. We have cars that have been toasted, and then the other half of the car can be absolutely pristine. People who are 1,200 of them, who totally against anything in human nature, are jumping or falling on the outside of this building at 105 floors and below, jumping or falling to their deaths, but they seem to be almost microwaved from the inside because they're coming down in body parts. That's not normal for free fall. Big steel beams that appear in these pictures. It looks to me like they're dust-defying. We just talked about that. They didn't fall over. Cars that are blowing up or toasting 7 blocks away. Vehicles blowing up. All these things going on that don't make any sense whatsoever for any kind of normal demolition that we're talking about. Now, I want to ask you about this because you've gotten a lot of, you've drawn a lot of heat from the 9/11 truth movement that who have bought into the story this was a controlled demolition. My question is, why do you think they might not be more open to this evidence here? It seems like everybody's looking for the truth on this. Why is there any resistance among these professionals to look at your work seriously? Or are they starting to do that now?
9/11 was a psychological operation, including the thermite story, the bombs in the building story that were planted there. Like, when NIST had their press conference talking about the release of the Building 7 report, they had this neat and tidy false choice. And in my comments to them, I called them on that and notified them of fraud, that they were guilty of fraud, because they denied the bombs in the building story by saying it was silent. It wasn't any loud noise associated with it, so it couldn't be bombs in the building. But they didn't apply that to their own story.
Mm-hmm.
If the building came crashing down, it should sound like it was raining dump trucks.
Yes.
And it was silent. So that also dismisses their story. They contradicted their own story.
Well, so you're saying that story about the thermite and the controlled demolition was also planted to manage impressions?
Very much, very much. Even on that day, we had Dan Rather saying it looks like a controlled demolition. There's the Van Romero that afternoon said he was sure it was a controlled demolition. It only take a few explosives to do it. Then a week later, he retracted it, and then right after that, he got $85 million in grant money. So it must be true. Turns out a year before 9/11, he gave a short course on energy weapons at the Directed Energy Professional Society's annual meeting. So he knew what he was looking at.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't a mistake of what he was looking at. Mm-hmm. There's all these Easter eggs, I call them, that were left out, like an Easter egg hunt for a 3-year-old. When the 3-year-old finds them, they think they've really found something important, and they hang on to it, like Larry Silverstein's pullet.
Yes, I was just going to ask you that exact question. Please tell us more about that, because a lot of people saw that in the film Loose Change. I saw it, and it's Larry Silverstein saying, "Oh yeah, we had to pull it."
It's sort of silly, because what are they saying, that firefighters go around with sticks of dynamite in their back pocket just in case? That's how they fight fires, with sticks of dynamite in their pockets.
But why would Larry Silverstein say that?
I said, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
Who knows if it was something that was taken out of context, or if he was putting out the Easter egg, or what it was, but it makes no sense.
No.
Because fire departments are not in the business of controlled demolition. Plus, if you don't know what the story is, you can't size up the event. You don't know where the damage is in the building. If you're going to chuck in that piece of dynamite, you launch it in there, where do you put it?
Oh, well, not only that, if it were a traditional controlled demolition, wouldn't it have taken weeks or even months to prepare?
Oh, yeah. There's so much about it that
right.
It doesn't make sense. Plus, if you had a controlled demolition, it breaks buildings into chunks, and the chunks slam to the ground. With Building 7, that is indeed the smoking gun. There was essentially no seismic signature of that building's demise. Just a teeny bit, like a 0.6 on the Richter scale. That day there were quarry blasts over New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Those were picked up.
Mm-hmm.
But the demise of Building 7 didn't make a seismic impact. It really stood out from background noise. And it's 6 times the potential energy of the Seattle King Dome.